chartered accountants as members, because practically and technically probably institute could not have done it. That writ petition is pending. The High Court has ordered the department that you sit with CA Institute and other petitioners and find out a way to this. Extend the date, or you announce waiver of interest and penalty, or do something that gives relief to the taxpayers who could not upload their returns on time. So that writ petition is pending, but pending that writ petition, we do not know if these reports are not uploaded at normal speed, and on the last 1 or 2 days if you get stuck, whether you will be able to get extension, waiver of penalty, interest, we are not aware. So it is better that we start this exercise as early as possible. Now, the concept of arm's length price. See, up to now, as everybody discussed, that under section 48(2), the officer gets the power of making addition if the expenditure is not found to be at fair market value, it is excessive. To the extent it is found excessive, he was allowed to make adjustment. But now, if you are covered by domestic TP, the transaction is supposed to be at arm's length price. So first, let us have a look at what is arm's length price. Concept of arm's length price is applicable for determining taxable income arising from international transactions since 2001. Now, ALP is defined to mean a price which is applied or proposed to be applied in a transaction between persons other than associated concerns. In uncontrolled transactions, that is where the transaction is between unrelated parties. As Jayant Bhai was pointing out during the break, in the provisions the terminology used is market value. So whether there is difference between market value and fair market value. And I think yes, there is a clear distinction between fair market value and market value. When you judge fair market value, probably so many other factors you may consider, you may add, and although the price doesn't match with market value, it may be possible to justify that this is the fair market value. It would be. Now, in determining arm's length price, when you consider transactions between two unrelated parties, comparability will be fundamental. Because with whom you will compare the transaction. I think if we put it absolutely simply, suppose I have made payment for certain goods to a company whose turnover is 5 crores in a year, and that company is a related party under 48(2), and I want to benchmark under CUP and compare this price with the price prevailing in the market. Now, if from public domain or otherwise, I select a company whose turnover is 500 crore and who is dealing in similar product, it is possible that that company may be selling this product at low price. So whether it is comparable. Now, comparability will depend upon FAR analysis, function, asset, risk analysis, functions performed, assets employed, risk undertaken. And this is an exhaustive analysis. One should prepare a transfer pricing policy where all these three aspects should be discussed in detail. And I would agree with what the previous speaker said, that instead of treating every transaction into a method, it is better if we are able to gather facts properly, compare our facts in terms of comparability of functions, assets employed and risks undertaken, and we justify the charging of higher price or lower price. In these terms, it would be better than harping upon a particular method. Now, selection of method is something which I was told to deal with, and I will deal with it in the end. where there are several difficulties, although there are some expenses which can be generally put under a particular method, but then no particular method is foolproof for the reasons which we will discuss little later. So comparison of conditions in a controlled transactions with conditions in transactions between unrelated parties will be very fundamental. Now if you look at the cup method, the method first requires you to compare your transaction. Once you find a comparable entity and comparable transaction, first compare the price. And if you find that there is difference in the price, then also start searching for difference in conditions. And to give very simple examples of difference in conditions is that I might have paid price to my related entity on CIF basis, whereas the comparable price that I have bought from the market between two unrelated parties may be on FOB basis. Now the difference between FOB and CIF I can reconcile by making adjustment in the price. So these kind of adjustments are allowed under the cup method, and since we are not on the methods in particular, I will not go into details. There are many terms and conditions which should be different. For example, risk undertaken. If there is a firm contract, there is no risk and price may be lower. But if there is no firm contract and you are selling to independent parties without any commitment, the risk undertaken is more. Take another example, one party is selling on credit basis, another party is selling on cash basis. So again here there will be adjustment for the interest element for the credit period. So under cup, first you select a comparable, then make adjustment for the differences in terms and conditions, and here your facts would come very handy. Now again, when you compare and you talk of arm's length price, let us look at what approach we have in this country and the approach that the other countries have. In our country, in most of the firms, including Big Four, I have seen transfer pricing analysis is done by chartered accountants. Whereas in other countries like UK, USA, in their transfer pricing department, major staff is economists and not chartered accountants. So the exercise that we are doing, I have seen, we ignore economics and most of the factors which go into determination. Now let me give a simple example. Today there was a debate on directors' remuneration. You cannot fit directors' remuneration under any of the 5 methods. Whether cup, cost plus, RPM, profit split, TNMM, none of the methods is suitable. Now it is fortunate that by notification number 18, which was issued on 23rd May 2012 last year, they permitted any other method. So in benchmarking directors' remuneration, probably the HR appraisal, HR study, and apart from HR study, which will talk only of competence of the director or managing director, you may also have to take into consideration various decisions taken by the director which took company to a different level. So this analysis of economics is very important in arguments. I am aware that when we were arguing under 48(2) without transfer pricing, so many such arguments were coming very handy when we had to justify a higher price paid to a related party, the nature of services rendered, the quality of services rendered, the quality of products, the timeliness in supply of goods, the punctuality, all these factors which you will never find in TNMM or any other method, you can add and present before the officer in justification of arm's length price. Particularly when you follow up, you can definitely make use of all these factors which are value adds which a related party may be giving you and which may not be available from independent party in the market. So these are various factors which one has to factor into the arguments that you make while representing the case. Now, what kind of preparation department makes, whether for domestic transactions, they create a separate cell, they have different factors for consideration, is a question to be judged. Of course, on informal basis, an argument that even if I pay a higher price to my related entity who is paying tax at the same rate should justify that there should not be any transfer pricing adjustment. But this will be informal. If he goes by law, then it becomes too theoretical and impractical. He will say that I will not accept. If it is not an ALP, I will make addition. But you can definitely put up this argument while representing the case. Now, one more point that Karisma informed that in a country like America, domestic transfer pricing is there. Now let us compare what is the distinction between domestic transfer pricing in that country and our country. In that country, the taxes are at state level. So if one entity is in one state, another is in another state, the domestic transfer pricing applies. Whereas in our country, the income tax is applicable to the entire country at the same rate, same provisions apply, and the income tax is collected by the central government. So at least so far as 48(2) transactions are concerned, we are at disadvantage. In case of 80 IA 10 AA transactions, it is an exception, probably only in this country, that within the same entity, transfer pricing provisions are applicable. But here particularly, I personally do not have any grievance, because if one unit is claiming exemption, another unit is not claiming exemption, there is always a tendency to transfer the profit of non-exempt entity to exempt entity. So there, if transfer pricing provisions are applicable, it is justifiable, but 48(2) certainly is problematic. These are the different methods, and I will not focus on this. We all know these 5 methods. Now, other method is available, and on other method, what transactions we can cover and discuss when we come to benchmarking. Filing form number 3CEB. Now, this is not within my mandate, but one very small point which was discussed in Q&A in last session, I would just like to repeat and have a suggestion. That currently, if you use income tax utility, the income tax software, there is no space for any remarks that you would like to put. But if you use software supplied by private software suppliers, there are 1 or 2 softwares where they have created a space for attaching PDF files in the form of remark. If suppose you use income tax software, there is no space or there is no provision for attaching a PDF file, what would be the way out? I think you can file physically your remarks in a separate sheet of paper along with the 3CEB report to the assessing officer. This is one way. But if you see technically, whatever you file physically is not valid now. The report is required to be filed electronically. The institute had taken up in last 2 months that both in taxonomic report and transfer pricing report, you allow a space for remarks, and that too sufficient space, as much as we require, because we do not know whether remarks will be in 1000 words or it will be in 2000 words. They had agreed that they will do it, but so far there is no space for remarks. If they amend the utility, it is available, it is fine. Otherwise, you may use a private software, attach a PDF file with your remarks, because there are so many transactions where you will be required to give remarks, particularly capital expenditure and many others which we will discuss again in the course of discussion. Now, these penalties were made known to you in the last session also, and you have seen it in the provisions. Before we start with 48(2)B, a small point on what is the objective. behind this particular provision. The objective is to discourage excessive payments to associated concerns. This is the objective. And if this is the stated objective when 48(2) was introduced, probably our argument of same rate of tax applicable to payer and receiver may theoretically not hold water. Practically, if the officer thinks of equity, then in such cases he may accept the price even if it is excessive if both the entities are paying tax at the same rate. But that depends upon the officer only. Now here I would like to go by the provision verbatim which I have covered elsewhere. Let us look at 48(2), the verbatim provision. Who is a relative? We are on relative now. Where the assessee is an individual, any relative of the assessee. Where the assessee is a company, firm, association of persons or Hindu undivided family, any director of the company, partner of the firm, or member of the association or family, or any relative of such director, partner or member. Any individual who has a substantial interest in the business or profession of the assessee, or any relative of such individual. We will discuss substantial interest little later. A company, firm, AOP or HUL having a substantial interest in the business or profession of the assessee, or any director, partner, member of such company, firm, AOP or HUL, or any other company carrying on business or profession in which the first mentioned company has substantial interest. Now, if you look at this provision, this last line was added in the last finance act. So, what difference it makes? Earlier, transaction between holding and subsidiary was covered. Holding company having substantial interest in subsidiary, and subsidiary to holding was also covered, because if the other company has substantial interest in you, you are covered. But with this last line, or any other company carrying on business or profession in which the first mentioned company has substantial interest, this will cover common subsidiary companies of a holding company. So if A Limited has 3 subsidiary companies, B Limited, C Limited, D Limited. Earlier transactions between B Limited and C Limited, C Limited and D Limited, and A Limited and D Limited were not covered. But with this addition, now transactions between common subsidiaries of a holding company will also be covered. So that is one aspect which has been added by the last finance act. Indirect holding, again we will cover separately, it has already been covered, we will repeat. Any person who carries on business, a company, firm, AOP, HUL of which a director, partner or member has a substantial interest in the business or profession of the assessee, or any director, partner or member of such company, firm, AOP, HUL or any relative. And any person who carries on a business or profession where the assessee is an individual or relative of such assessee has a substantial interest in the business of or profession of that other person. So, even individuals and relatives having substantial interest and vice versa situation is also covered by 48(2). Now, 48(2) we are applying for a very long time, and what you must have observed in your tax audit report, that up to last year in tax audit report, I have seen reports even within Reliance Group companies, in tax audit report transactions between holding and step down subsidiaries were reported. under 48(2) in clause 17, 17F or something, I don't remember the exact alphabet, but in clause 17 it was reported. Now we are debating, because now transfer pricing provisions are applicable, and formal transfer pricing provisions, which we expect to be resulting in various adjustments, we are debating whether step-down subsidiaries are covered. And the popular view is that transactions between step-down subsidiary and ultimate holding company are not covered. See, the provision talks of substantial interest. If one company has substantial interest in another company, either itself or through director, then the transaction will be covered. Now let us look at how substantial interest is defined in section 48(b). Substantial interest is defined as, in the case of a company, any person who is the beneficial owner of shares